Alright, so today we're looking at the golf swing of US Open champion Brooks Koepka. Since his victory, I've had a lot of students ask me about his club face position throughout his swing, which, as we see, he's got what a lot of people would call a shut club face, kind of like Dustin Johnson. And I've had a lot of people asking me how in the world he can have a position like that and play a tiny fade as he does off the tee and drive it so long and so straight. So in this video we're gonna break down first how he creates that position, why he creates it, and also how he gets so much power in his golf swing. So to start by explaining how he gets in this position, we need to look at his setup on the left here. So the first thing we need to notice is the position of his elbows. So his left elbow is pointing roughly towards the target, maybe not quite, but very close. And what that tells us is he has his forearm rolled more towards his chest, or clockwise. And that tells us also that his shoulder, that shoulder socket is also rolled towards his chest. And if we look at his right elbow, we can see that this elbow is pointed a little more towards his hip. It's a little harder to see in 2 dimensions, but we can see it. And what that tells us is, for his right arm, his forearm is rolled clockwise this way, and his shoulder is externally rotated, again clockwise. So what this does is it discourages excess rolling of the forearms in his backswing. So essentially he sets up with them in a position where it's hard for them to continue rolling. And he complements this position with his grip, which, although it's hard to see, we can see the logo of his glove, so we can tell that his left hand is in a slightly strong position. But we can certainly tell, it's more obvious with his right hand, that it's in a much stronger position. We can see that V roughly towards his right shoulder. And so what that tells us is he's gripping the club in a way that's going to discourage excess rolling of the wrists and therefore rolling the club face open on the backswing. So when we see him set up that way, we can understand why when he takes the club back, he's not trying to roll his forearms or his hands, and he's able to create that bowed left wrist and that less open club face position. Kind of get the sense that it's a one-piece takeaway where his torso is doing most of the work. So now if we're going to explain why Brooks would ever want this position of the club face throughout his swing and why it's such a crucial part of making his golf swing successful, we need to focus on 2 key athletic and powerful moves he makes in his downswing. So the first move that we want to focus on is just how powerfully he rotates his torso and his hips. So as he approaches impact, he's just getting there, you see right at impact, we get the sense that his belly button is almost already pointing at the target. It's off in that direction, so he's really turned his body through the ball. And what he's doing is he's activating a ton of muscle fascia in his torso to help create speed in his golf swing. Now, in conjunction with the rotation of his torso, he's doing something very important with his trail arm, in particular his elbow, which we can see there. So, if we look on the left here, we're going to notice that the look is as if he's driving with his right elbow leading, which it actually is for a little bit there. Almost like the feeling of losing an arm wrestle or getting ready to skip a rock, kind of do a sidearm throw. So, to kind of illustrate it more clearly on the right here, I draw this line, his hands and his elbow. We're going to see that as he starts that downswing, he drives his elbow forward quicker than he does his arm. So his elbow really is leading at the beginning. Now, what he's accomplishing by using these two moves in his swing is, well, one we know is a lot of power. So we already talked about him activating all that muscle fascia. And the elbow move is helping him generate a ton of leg. So keeping that shoulder externally rotated, kind of in that losing arm wrestle position, allows him to really store that energy and fire right at the ball, rather than some players we see who fire that arm too early and lose their speed, kind of casting the club. But another benefit that Brooks gets to enjoy from these moves is that when you rotate your body and make an effort to drive that right elbow, or the trail elbow, what you'll notice, and you can try this for yourself, is that from that position where that, remember that losing arm wrestle type of feel, it becomes very hard to roll that lead forearm. So what that does is it keeps Brooks from flipping that club over, rolling that forearm around counterclockwise. We can even see that on the right here as he drives through. That club is in no rush to roll over, so he's never going to flip it. So the result is what we would call a lower rate of closure, meaning his club face is turning over at a lower rate through impact. And for any golfer, but particularly a power hitter like Brooks, that's a very important quality at impact, because that's what's going to allow him to swing with so much clubhead speed, yet have a chance to be fairly consistent in terms of control and accuracy. Now, this takes us back to why he would have a less open club face throughout his swing, and you can probably already start to guess why, but I don't like calling this shut, because shut implies that he would have to open the club to hit it square, and we know he doesn't have to do that. What's actually happening is, again, I call it less open. His club is in a position where it complements his lower rate of closure. So now as he comes through the ball, you can even really see it here. It's just like he's turning his torso and using his body to rotate through the ball. So a ton of power, because of course the big muscles create the power, all the muscles in here. And he's not relying on his hands to do anything. He's able to keep them very stable. So it's a really good way to move through impact, provided you find a way to get that club closer to square sooner, so you don't have to do anything with your hands through impact. So you can see Brooks on the left here, it's a little blurry, but there's just no rolling of the hands, because there's no need to roll the hands. So one thing you really got to make sure is that you know how to get that club in this position sooner. So for Brooks, that means setting up with a strong grip and a position of the forearms and elbows that's going to discourage him from rolling the club face open in the backswing. And it's going to help him maintain that bowed wrist, setting it early in the swing, get that club face where he wants it, and just go nuts through the ball. Awesome stuff. Now, one last thing I want to point out is that while those moves that we just talked about might seem kind of unorthodox or complicated, they're actually not that uncommon across lots of different sports, and they're always on display by very good athletes. So on the right here now I have Mike Trout, who's kind of considered the best hitter in the major leagues, and in his swing here, right as he plants his foot, so he took that stride, we're going to see rotation of his torso. See his number disappearing there. And if we watch that elbow, just like Brooks, he's driving that elbow inward. So he's the same way he's activating all that fascia, creating a ton of bat speed, and even though it doesn't really matter in baseball, he actually has a pretty stable release. So he doesn't really roll the wrists through the ball, he's really focused on his torso turning. So with Brooks on the left here, we can really see it from this angle. Same idea, but on an inverted golf swing plane. So torso is turning, elbows driving, tons of club head speed and stability. Now, of course, the one major difference here is that golfers need to be wary of a club face. So you can see that Brooks makes sure to have a proper grip. He's got his forearms in the right position. He's taking care of that club face as we showed earlier, so he doesn't hit it off to the right, which will certainly happen if you have an open club face coming into the ball. In Mike's case, the bat's round. You can hit it to any field. He doesn't really have to worry about those hands. You can see how they that position would roll the club face open if it was a golf club. But the body action and the elbow move is the same. So if Mike were to play golf, we'd want to watch that hand action and make sure that he focuses on that, because he'd very likely have everything else pretty well in order in his golf swing because he's such a good athlete. So that's it for my analysis of Brooks Koepka. Next time you see him on TV, be sure to keep an eye out for some of these moves. I think the more that we experience them and review them, the easier it is to grasp them fully over time, and perhaps even start to explore implementing them on some level in your own golf swing.